Welcome to the Men After God podcast, where you will be challenged and encouraged as you pursue God, achieve success, and raise a thriving family. Join your host, Dustin, and his guests on a weekly journey to grow as husbands, fathers, and men after God. Here is your host, Dustin Alley.
Hey guys, welcome back to another week of the Men After God podcast. We've got a very interesting story, and pun intended, as you'll see whenever we get into this conversation with my friend Ben Avery. Ben, I met through social media channels and came across his book, and was just kind of been doing a little research on him, and then just got to have a great conversation before we started recording with him to hear more about him. And I can't wait for him to expound on just some of the things he mentioned to me, because being a man after God isn't always the way you might think it is. Sometimes when I think of it, especially being a pastor in ministry, I can imagine a pastor. I can imagine someone in my line of work. Maybe you think of it as a business owner who's doing great things, but is maintaining his Christian faith and giving back to his church and doing things like that. But Men After God as a movement and our podcast content and Facebook community is for any Christian man that is seeking to achieve success in life in whatever form God has called them to, because each of us have different stories. And I love Ben's story because he comes at it with a unique perspective because he's a writer. And you don't often hear a lot about writers. I mean, maybe some prolific ones and things, but he's written comics and he's got a great book out now and he's doing some other work. And I can't wait to hear how he has seen success in his life and he's maintained his faith in his family, because he's also a children's pastor, which if you've ever worked in children's ministry, you know what type of life that can be. So, Ben, welcome to the podcast, man. Thank you for making time for us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dustin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to getting to know you a bit. Tell us about your family and the kids you got, and just kind of let's hear how you met your wife. I'd like to hear that story if that's a good one.
So the goofy part of the story is my wife and I went on a date. It was a double date, but not with each other. So that was the beginning of her freshman year. I think it was my sophomore year.
Okay.
And I was, my roommate and her roommate were brother and sister. And I was on the date with her roommate. She was on the date with my roommate. Apparently, I don't remember this, but I have been told this a couple times. The next day, I was a little bit rude to her, and she walked by and said something, some sort of inside joke about the scarf I was wearing or something. I was just like, what? And I just kind of walked by. So not the best impression at first, but eventually then second semester, we started hanging out, and she was friends with some of my other roommates. And I'll go ahead and tell the story. She had tickets to a Harry Connick Jr. concert, and my roommate was going to go with her because he loved Harry Connick Jr. and so did I. And I said, you know what, Brad, I am going to get those tickets. I'm going to go to that concert with her if I have to date her, which ended up happening before the concert, but not because of what I had said. And so then he's like, well, you said you were going to do this. I was like, yeah, just kind of happened though. So we were in musicals and plays together. And so that's how we started hanging out, really more talking together and getting to know each other. And it just so happened to coincide that was happening in the lead up to the Harry Connick Jr. concert, which was a fantastic, fantastic concert.
You know, as you were saying, I had to pull up a tab here real quick and search Harry Connick Jr. because I'm just not familiar with him.
Oh, really?
And yeah, but that's awesome, man. And now, how long have you all been married?
So we've been married. We're coming up on 30 years. No, coming up on.
Congratulations, man.
It was 97, awesome. So
okay.
Coming up on 26 years, maybe. I don't know.
So that's probably why I've not heard of Harry Connick Jr. I was about 10, and so.
Yeah, he's also jazz, you know, and that album, that tour was a funk jazz fusion, and it's just a wonderful album, just a fun album, and.
I'm going to check him out now, man. You've piqued my interest.
Yeah, and, just a phenomenal piano player. Like, he's just amazing. So
let's see what I can find. I'm going to find some stuff while we're talking here. That's awesome. So you guys did that. You've been married since about 97 or so. And then talk about your kids. I think you said you have 5?
Yeah, 5 kids. So I have 2 boys and 3 girls. The boys are the bookends and the girls are the books. So my oldest is a senior in college, and he'll be graduating with a ministry degree. My youngest is a middle school 7th grader. So those are my 2 boys. In the middle, I have my 3 girls. My oldest girl is a junior in college. My middle girl is just graduated high school. And then my youngest girl is a senior in high school. Wow. And My two older daughters are both planning on getting into disability ministry, which is a big part of
Oh,
our family
wow.
lifestyle.
Okay.
And then my youngest daughter, we're working on senior year right now, but she's also kind of thinking through like that kind of thing as well. So it's kind of
Okay.
interesting to see them as they develop into who they are and
Yeah.
just what their values are. But yeah.
That's awesome, man. That is so cool. And so now, we talked about your writing, right? You're an
Hmm.
author. You've published many books, and then you were talking about comics. You've written.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've been published with Marvel, and you said some others. Who are some of the other companies that have published you?
I've been published by Image and Marvel, Zondervan. Kingstone is the most recent one. And then there's been
Yeah.
a number of small presses that I've been published by, and
Okay.
actually um, had my own small press for a little while too. That's how kind of I got the gears rolling and the wheels turning on how that career worked out. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's been a number of small presses, but the big ones are definitely it's the Marvel and
Yeah.
the
You dropped that
Kingstone.
Marvel name. That means something right there. Yeah. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
I got in through the back door though, so it wasn't
Hey,
like
but you got in.
they
You
sought
got
me,
in though.
but I
Yeah.
did get in. Yeah, that's
You
the
did get
yeah.
in. That's awesome. So let's talk about how that journey started for you, because each of us, again, we're here to achieve success with a thriving faith and family. Your journey of success as an author, how did that start? What was it like for you? You said you knew from an early age that
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
enjoyed writing. Like, what did writing look like for you growing up?
So all through elementary school, high school, college, I've writing was a hobby for sure, but it was a hobby I spent a lot of time doing and just really loved doing and enjoyed doing. Um, as I got out of school, I went to a Christian film school, and that got because at one point I thought I wanted to be in Hollywood. Like that was my mission field, was going to be Los Angeles, Hollywood. So I went to this.
It's needed, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Went to this Christian film school, which was a great experience. Went to a Christian writing program a little bit later after my wife and I had been married for a little bit. It was a 5-week intensive program, which is another long story with that. But uh, through that, I just learned how to think visually because
Okay.
that's when you're writing for film, you have to think that way. What that ended up benefiting was the comic book side of things. I'd always been a part of these Christian comic book groups, and so I got to know a couple different Christian comic book writers or artists, and had some relationship with a couple of them. And the way that I ended up kind of falling into things was one of those artists was working on a project, and he didn't like the scripter who was on it, and so he asked the publisher, hey, did we ever do any kind of vetting here? And the publisher's like, no, it's just the guy, and he said, well, I'm not a big fan of his script, I don't really want to work with this. Would it be
Mhm.
possible for me to bring in 5 or 6 different friends, have them bring writing samples, and then we can choose from there. The project was a project with George R. R. Martin, who is a
Oh, wow.
Game of Thrones
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
It's not Game of Thrones. It is related to it. It is I call it his Hobbit. It takes place 100 years ahead of the Game of Thrones. It's a kind of
Oh,
self-contained thing called the Hedge Knight. And so
okay.
he sent it to me and said, hey, would you be willing to do this? I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And so I read the novella that we were talking about adapting. I really enjoyed it. There's a phrase in there that was like, oh, that just really resonates with me. I want this job. And if I want to be the guy who gets this job, so I can make sure that gets into the
Yeah.
book. Uh, so I sent in my sample. The samples went to George. George picked mine, and so I was in on the job. And so it was originally published by a company called. No, it was originally published by Image, which is one of the bigger publishers out there.
Okay.
They ended up doing us a little bit wrong as far as
Mm.
contracts and things like that. So went to another publisher, and then for the sequel, Marvel bought the contract, and
Oh,
so that's
wow.
my backdoor into Marvel there.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, so that's really how the career side of things started. What that did though was it opened up some doors that I was not expecting at all. Um, One of the doors that it opened was just to be able to do some of my own creator owned things. I did a book called
Okay.
Armor Quest in the midst of that, which was kind of a Lord of the Rings meets Ephesians 6. Where each issue of that
Okay.
comic was a different piece of armor. The kid is on his quest and he's
Oh,
getting these
wow.
pieces of armor. It was I was able to work on that. Got a publisher for that. That's what opened the doors for Zondervan for me. Um, And then when I was finishing up my work with Zondervan, I went to work for an animation company, which was great, but nothing ever came of it. But when I lost that job, which basically came down to they ran out of work for me and I was pulling a salary from them, and I just felt really bad. I was just like, I can't do this. Gave them my 2 weeks and said, I'll still work freelance on the projects if you're going to continue them. But if we're not going to continue, you shouldn't be
getting a
paying my salary
for it.
and
Right. Yeah.
insurance. So I didn't know what I was going to do after that, but that's not too long after that, I ended up going to a film festival in Asheville, Tennessee, where I set up a booth with my comics. They did a mini Comic-Con is what they called it. And a guy came, was looking at my stuff, and I said, what I really want to do now that I've done Kingdoms, which is about the exile, I really want to do the life of Christ. And it was a 10-minute conversation. He just looks at me and says, so do we. And when you get home, tell me how much it'll take to make it happen. And
Okay.
so that opened the door. Then that was Art from Kingstone, and that opened the door to just a whole floodgate of freelance work with them. And and so that's just, I mean, that's the flyover of a lot of the beats along the path.
Man.
But
so like I've done some writing, and by some writing I mean a couple blog articles, so stuff like that, and I enjoy it. I don't know if it's a calling for me like it sounds like it is for you. And so what's the life of a writer like, or the life of an author? What does it look like there, and how do you balance that with your family? And then talk about that for a minute, and then definitely, because your writings, especially your newest book, and you've already mentioned how a lot of your writings is heavily influenced by your faith. Just how you balance what you have to do as an author with your family and your faith. What's that look like for you?
So there's been 2 balancing acts with this. The first one was the more difficult one for sure on the family side, and that was when I first started getting those jobs, and I was working on the Hedge Knight and doing Time Flies and Kingdoms for Zondervan, and doing some of the self-published stuff. I was working as a full-time teacher. I taught English, drama, communications, and in the midst of all of that, more jobs were coming my way. And then my Armor Quest, there was a company that said, we want to turn that into a movie, and we want to bring you on. We could bring you on a salary. We can match your teaching salary. We can match that and give you insurance. And I was like, this sounds great. That's what I said. So I quit my teaching job, and for a full year, that was my job, was kind of shepherding this into being an animated feature film. And the whole thing, just we spent that whole year like, what's the $10 million idea that's going to be worth getting $10 million of investment? And at the end of that year, we still hadn't come to it, and it just got to a point where I was like, okay, this is great and all, but this is not, I don't feel good about this.
Okay.
That's when I turned around and became 100% freelance. And so that balance was very difficult, because and I worked with mostly Christian clients, and it's nothing against Christian clients, but they weren't always the best clients to work with.
Most of the time, and this is my experience just in business and different things. As Christians, we like everything for free because our salvation is free, or we like it really, really dirt cheap. And
and one thing I will say about Kingstone for sure is they paid top dollar. Like, they matched the page rate that I got from Marvel.
Wow.
And they paid top
Shout
dollar,
out to
and
them. That's awesome. I'm going to have to go buy one of their Bibles then.
Yeah, they treated me so well. It was just a great experience. It was the small jobs that I was trying to just hustle and get and make sure. And I ended up. I'm not sure how deep I'm going to end up going into this, but I ended up working as a janitor at our church, and that was something that it came about. I was volunteering every week at the church as a children's teacher, and it was great. I loved doing that, and I didn't expect to get paid to do that. I was a volunteer. The church could not bring on extra staff and that kind of thing. And I just loved doing it. Storyteller is the phrase I use to describe myself. I love telling stories with puppets, with comics, with whatever tools are at hand. I love telling stories. But the job that I got at the church was the janitor job. And that was because we had feast or famine. And when you're 100% freelance, if you have people who are, there was a 6-month project that I worked on. They paid some up front, which is what I'd asked for. I finished up the project and asked them to pay me the rest, and they were just, sorry, the money that we got in to pay you, we turned around to pay an artist instead, and we thought we'd have the money back in time for you now, but it hasn't come.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up burning through our savings. It was just a really, really dire, difficult time. And that's where I humbled myself to
Yeah.
be the janitor at the church.
Yeah.
Went through there was a lot of soul searching,
Oh, I'm
where you
sure.
have just time to yourself, vacuuming, cleaning the
Mopping and
toilets.
yeah.
It was the first half of that. I think it was a 4 or 5 year period, was really, really difficult and really, really bad. And my
Man,
wife was not happy.
I
The
think
reason I
that's
took the job was so we had some regular income, though. We always knew, even though it was a part-time job, we'd have that regular income.
yeah.
So the balance.
Let me pause you real quick, Ben,
Yeah,
because what I want to highlight, you're just part of that story right there, man. You were leaning into your gifting God gave you, and you're pursuing after that. And then it wasn't working out for a minute. Like, I don't think you ever stopped. It doesn't sound like you did, but you had to, you had to take a turn, and you had to get through life. You had to suck it up, do something that was difficult, and you had to make it happen for your family. And I think that just speaks to your character. I think that is such a needed thing in our generation. And I say that, I'm a millennial, and I'm the generation coming after me. Just being able to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, do what we've got to do, but never lose sight of the goals and stuff we have around us, and especially never losing sight of that faith or family that keeps us going. So, man, that's awesome that you did that there. So keep going, man.
Yeah.
Let's hear more of that story. What happened after the janitor thing ended, or how did it
So
come to
the
an end?
janitor thing ended when I got a call from the person at our current church. So when I had been in college, I had done some youth work with him. Again, it was storytelling stuff. It was coming up with skits to go along with the youth message for Wednesday night. And so he would come and meet with us at the college. And then on Wednesday, we go over to the church and we would do what we had practiced and everything. Well, he gave me a call and just said, "Hey, we got a job for a children's pastor position. And your name came up because I'd also been a children's minister at a camp for a week, and the worship leader at the church, he went to Terry and said, hey, have you ever heard of this Ben guy?" And the story was that at the end of the week of camp, it's only about a half hour away from the two churches, are about a half hour away from each other, and the camp is right in the middle in between.
Yeah.
It's our denominational camp. His daughter was going home with him on Sunday and said, "Hey, can we go to that church?" And he's like, "Why do you want to go to that church?" "Well, that's Mr. Ben's church." And so I had made an impression on her, which made an impression on him, and that hit my name up with Terry when he needed to find someone. So that's where, I shifted out of the janitor job when I moved into the second phase of the balance, which was balancing between having a full-time job, which my pastoral role at our church is a full-time position. My wife's role is a part-time position that sometimes skews almost full-time because it's ministry,
Right. Yeah. Oh, man.
But
any of us in
she's
ministry can feel that.
she's on the clock. It's hourly, and I
Right.
if she goes above contract, I'm fine with it. So now it was a matter of finding time to be able to work on these other things that I love, and being disciplined about just getting into doing the scripting and doing whatever it might be that I'm working on. The one good thing that I did notice happen is, as I was settling into this new role, the freelance work started dropping off. And so the timing was just about perfect. And part of it was, again, with Kingstone, we were doing the Kingstone Bible, and I was working on, I didn't do every book for them, but I did a number of them. And there's only 66, right? Like, we're not going to do the Bible too. We're not going to do, the Book of Mormon. It was, we were, they were landlocked, and so there've been some projects that came along after that with them. But that was the main goal on that project, was to finish the Bible. And now they're doing some history books and things that I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool, but don't really have time for that. So,
right. Yeah.
And so that was the timing of that was just about perfect, and nothing I could have planned. And
it's a God
it was
thing,
nothing
man.
it was just God moved on Terry's heart. God moved on David's heart. And suddenly I'm like, hey. And so I've been doing the pastoral job for about 9 years now.
Oh, wow. That is so cool, man. Congratulations on that. 9 years in children's ministry. That gives you just an opportunity to really invest heavily in some people and see God just use that relationship for years to come. I love that.
Yeah.
So you're talking about your wife. I wanted to bring this up because guys that are listening, we were talking about this before we came on. The positionally on the org chart for the church, basically, Ben is his wife's boss. And now, while some of us may think that is a dream job, it is not. Okay. And I'll let Ben share some of his story with it. But I know for me, being in ministry, my wife has worked with me, never for me, with me on some things. And, we've got she's ran children's ministry, or she actually served as my secretary for a few months. And, man, it's hard to keep that from coming home with you. And there's always the times where, Ben, you said your wife did this too, where you've got to make the distinction when you're at home, like cooking dinner and having a conversation about something like, am I talking to my husband or am I talking to my pastor? Which one am I talking to right now? Because I need the husband, And so talk about that dynamic for a minute. What was that like, and how did y'all navigate that well, and still seem to navigate that?
Yeah. So, and she's been doing this for about 3 years now, maybe a little bit more than that, even if I might have the dates wrong on that. But we had some turnover. We needed a preschool director. My wife had experience working at a preschool. We, like I said, I think I said that we homeschooled our kids for a long while. And then her background is in education. And so it was one of those things where she was just the right person for the job. And my boss was asking me, okay, what do you think? Do you think this can work? Because she seems like a dream. Like, one of the things, so our head pastor and then the president of the college where my wife and I went to and then worked at, they're brothers. And so when they were talking about hiring me, Dennis, who we worked for at the college, his main thing as far as like being a positive reference for me was he married up. So
well, I think we all did that. I don't know if I've ever put it down as a reference on a resume, but
yeah. But I mean, she really was the right person for the job.
Yeah.
There was the hoops of like, let's walk through what is this going to look like. And one thing very early on for us was we wanted to make sure we always presented a united front. Another thing they were concerned about is I'm the area captain for the kids ministry. Then she is the preschool director, which means she's in charge of one side of my area. And then I have someone else in charge of elementary and someone else in charge of preteen. And so it'd be very easy for us to triangulate and to, make a power play. And so we've always been very careful to we are going to be as professional as possible at work. And then we both, our schedules aren't all exactly the same, but on Tuesdays we are both at work for the full day together. Tuesdays we always go out to lunch together, and it's our date, and so making time for each other in that way. And then, like you said, there'll be times when she will come home from work. My Thursday is my day off. Thursday is one of her full days. She'll maybe come home on a Thursday and just be, I got to talk to you as my husband, not as my boss. I'm not asking you to help fix the problem for me at work. I'm asking you to listen to the problem from me here at home, about whatever volunteers maybe are, dropping out, or, and Saturday night, and Saturday night is the worst. If anyone's listening and you're volunteering for preschool or for nursery, don't wait until Saturday night to let us know you can't be there.
I was going to say, I know exactly what you're about to say. And you know what? A lot of times, I don't know about you, Ben, but I get it. It comes from a good heart. They're like, I was trying to wait till last minute to be able to. Like, listen, I really appreciate that, but you should have told me Thursday, because that would have been a lot better than Saturday. Yeah.
Well, or they're waiting to see, like, am I going to feel better? And which is nice. Again, it's responsibility, and they're wanting to feel better, make sure they can come. But, we need to be able to plan. And it's hard to plan Saturday night. But so she'll come to me on Saturday night and just be, all right, I'm going to complain right now. It's husband and wife.
Man, that's awesome.
But just clearly defining those lines, because we just need to make sure that we know what we're stepping into. But the united front thing is also something that it's part of our parenting. It's part of our marriage, and now it's part of our work, where
that is huge.
We're on the same page.
I was going to say, it works well in your parenting. You got to make sure that that's going on. My wife and I have navigated that with our kids. And
although our middle schooler recently was like, you guys always team up against me. It's always 2 against 1. And we're like, well, yeah. What we didn't tell him was, if we don't agree, we're going to just stick with the one who was first.
Yep.
and we'll disagree behind closed doors.
Yeah.
We don't always, but we are always together. And she doesn't get, like my wife told him, look, you want us on the same side. You don't want
Yeah.
us going against each other, because that's not healthy. You want a healthy marriage for your parents. So
Absolutely. And he'll
he's in
appreciate it
middle
one
school,
day. Oh man, I've got a seventh grader, and that was, I know, working youth ministry, I learned seventh grade's like that transition year, and that's when they
Yeah.
really, come into their own, and that's definitely, guys. If you're still using the "because I said so" answer at seventh grade, stop it. It stopped working 2 years ago. You're already behind the power curve. It's
Um,
definitely a transition year.
it's a cool year too, though, because that's where, yeah, it's transition, but it's also they're becoming aware of things, and becoming aware of things like their faith, becoming aware of
Yeah.
things like what is justice, what is fairness, what is right, what is wrong, um, and they want to be too cool to get a hug from mom or whatever, but they're not quite yet,
No,
and
no, yeah, they're
yeah,
still
it's
there.
it's I think it's a really cool year. I
Oh, it definitely
yeah,
is.
I
One
just
thing I've seen with my son, just share a story about books. He has started reading the Percy Jackson series and just loves those. I introduced him to him because when I was in Afghanistan in 2012, 2012 Dustin is a different man than 2023 Dustin for a number of reasons. One, I wasn't really following God at that time, but when I was in Afghanistan, I'd read the Percy Jackson series. I read Hunger Games. I was reading George R. R. Martin's, the series for Game of Thrones. And then when I had kids, I introduced them to the Percy Jackson series. He fell in love with it. He read the entire first series, read the second series. I can't remember what it's called. And he's now on the third one, the Trials of Apollo, I think they are. And so I can't wait to now your book, is it intended for that audience, that middle school type
yeah,
audience, or is it more
I
adult?
would say my book is, as far as appropriateness, middle school and up,
Yeah. Okay.
because below middle school might be difficult to understand. I mean,
Okay.
it gets
Cool.
into sci-fi concepts and gets into time travel and things like that.
Yeah.
The intended audience, though, is definitely adults.
Okay.
As
Right.
far as just the main characters are all adults. The stuff they're wrestling with is more
Adult
about,
oriented.
it's uh, yeah, the primary character is in his mid-20s, and
Okay.
he's just getting out in the world and figuring out life. But the rest of the cast around him it's a variety of ages, but there literally aren't any children in that book.
Okay. All right.
I did
Cool,
do
man.
a short story that revealed one of the main character's children had died, so they're
Mm.
um
Might want to.
so they're
Well,
kind
we'll
of
keep that
in
away
that short
from the.
story, but it's not. I wouldn't call him a character,
Yeah,
so.
and probably not in the way I want my third grader checking it out.
No. It's
So,
definitely not.
that's
So
awesome. Well, good. Yeah, I'll have to
yeah,
get him that book. I've been, I don't know if you've seen me, I've been typing and doing, so I'm pulling up links to things you've said because I want to make sure we get these in our show notes, man.
Yeah.
I do want to, we're going to send our guys over to benavery.com. I noticed on benavery.com, you've got the link for your book to Amazon. Is that the best place for us to purchase, or where's the best place for us to purchase
yeah.
and
So
take care of you?
so Ghost of the Future is a novel. It's not a graphic novel. It's not a comic book. And I'm publishing it. It's a self-published endeavor that I'm doing. I started an LLC to be a publishing arm for myself, but also for some other projects. So there's two ways, and Amazon is the easiest if you want to get it fast and
All
you
right.
want to get it at a better price.
Well,
If you
what's
want
the
to get it
best way to
directly
benefit
from me,
you?
you go to
Yeah.
benavery.com, and you can link. There's a link right there to my
Buy
online
books.
store,
There
which
it is.
that would get it. You get it. It'll take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I everything goes in the mail on Thursdays because that's my day off.
Okay.
But it will be signed, and it's the personal touch, right?
Yeah.
And
Man, I'm looking at your site here, man. You got some really cool stuff. Man, I can't wait to share this, guys. If you're listening to this, first off, I want you to really hear Ben's story of just the way that he has achieved success in life. He's pursued what God called him to. And he's writing. That's how God made him, and he's used that for God's glory. He's using that to help communicate truth to people. He's been able to provide for his family, and I'm looking here, man. You've just got some really interesting graphic stories here. I'm seeing the ones with Peter and Paul, and guys, you got to go check his website out. Go to benavery.com. Buy books is on the left hand side of the page. It takes you there, and go check them out. I can't wait to jump into some of this. I'm going to have to get on it. So that's really cool, man. I've been so glad to have talked with you, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with our guys, because this is stuff, men. If you're listening, we're all about being a better father, being an engaged father. These and Ben, you tell me, but I'm looking at, Peter the apostle and Paul the apostle, and these just look like amazing stories for me to be reading with my kids, and then I'm looking at this Job graphic novel, like, man, this looks awesome. I can't wait to share this stuff with my own family. But tell us something. Is this good for a dad to be reading with their kids? And at what age would you recommend some of this stuff? And talk to us about everything you got here.
Yeah, so Job, I don't know if I would recommend that for too young of children. It is a graphic representation of the story, and so his family dies. He gets the sores, he scrapes them with the pottery.
Wow.
The thing with Job was I really just wanted to be able to, and this comes from my English teacher. Shakespeare is meant to be seen, not read.
That's good. Yeah.
And the book of Job, I look at the book of Job and I feel like it's meant to be heard, maybe even seen. I don't know. I know that some people say it may have been a dramatic presentation. I feel like when I read it, that it feels like a dramatic presentation instead of a narrative that's a historical narrative, as far as like, this is exactly what they said, exactly this moment. And because it's uninterrupted monologues,
Yeah.
but you can lose track of things as you're reading these uninterrupted monologues. And so the thing about Job, I actually had to interrupt the working on the life of Christ. Kingstone said, "Hey, we want to do Job. We need it now. Can you take a break?" And I was like, "I would love to do this. This is one of my dream things, is to be able to do the book of Job," because I wanted to do it in a visual way that you could see what was going on, see who's saying these things, these different things that his friends are saying, so you could kind of still track with them. There's Jeff Slemons was the artist on that. And one thing I can always do is brag about the art on these books, because I had nothing to do with any art. I told the artists what should go on the page. They made it look better than I even told them to make it look. And,
the artwork is phenomenal,
yeah.
and just like on all of your product. And so whoever your artist is, shout out to them, because this is great stuff.
And so Jeff, one of the things we did, I can't remember if this was from me or from him, but we wanted to make sure all those friends of his were very, very different looking. So one of them has a mohawk, and one of them is darker skin, one of them is lighter skin. It's just making these visual cues so you can track who are these different guys who are there, who are giving him this bad advice, and who he's then giving some sarcastic replies to and giving some wisdom-filled replies to. But that was the whole thing with Job, is I just wanted to present it as it was, in a lot of ways, to be an illumination in the old sense of the word, where they would, do these pictures in the margins of Bibles so you could see things,
Yeah.
Peter and Paul, on the other hand, while they are, I'm going to say this, people who've not seen pictures, you're not going to understand why this is a little bit ironic for me to come out of the gate with, but they are biblically accurate. But
they do not look like they take place in Bible times. I'll just go ahead and tell our listeners right now. All.
No,
Star Fox is the first thing I thought of when I saw Paul the Apostle.
Fox, Dark Crystal was one of the inspirations. Cantina and Star Wars, different things like that. This was one, over the years, I have had some strong opinions, and one of my strong opinions was, shouldn't put the Bible in space to make it cool. And then I had someone come to me and say, "Hey, Ben, we want to do Space Bible." And I was just, oh man, I don't know. And I did a lot of soul searching. I really, really did. And what I came down to was, first of all, you can't make the Bible more cool. Like you're not going to make it more cool by having David, fighting a robot Goliath, because it's already cool. Like there's already coolness there. But what I wanted to do when I tackled this project was to create a script that, if it had the sandals and bathrobes, it would work, because it's in the historical sense, but that has this metaphorical layer over it, which is these alien creatures. The Romans all look one way. One of the things I would throw out very quickly, we did Paul first and then we did Peter afterward, but Paul is small, scrawny, scrappy. Barnabas is in there. Well, Barnabas is this huge, hulking creature-looking thing, with the idea of just taking what was in Scripture and exaggerating it. Because when they were at Mars Hill or wherever it was, and Barnabas is standing there just looking all big and dignified, and Paul is doing all the teaching, doing all the talking. They're like, well, that Barnabas over there, that's Zeus. He must be Mercury, and like they're talking about them like that. So that's this visualization of that. What has come out of it is there are, and this is for all comic books, but for this, the way it was written, the way it was published, and the artwork, reluctant readers are more likely sometimes to pick up a graphic novel, to pick up a comic book. And that's the Kingstone Bible. That's what's behind that, is for middle school readers who are reluctant readers to pick up the Kingstone Bible. For Peter and Paul, I haven't seen any of the negative feedback that the publisher has gotten, which is good.
Do they just keep that from you?
I mean, yeah, he's protecting me from that. But I have seen some of the letters that have come in from moms or dads who are, first of all, surprised how biblically, it's
Accurate
written.
it is. Yeah.
I'm very careful in all of my fictionalizations of biblical stories. I don't add words to Christ.
That's good.
I might add in like some transitional phrasing, like just to make the conversation flow and feel like a conversation.
That makes sense.
But I'm not putting extra things. The one time I really had to be very careful, but I still needed to do something, was with him at the temple when he was a boy. And just trying to imagine what were they talking about. I tried to be vague, but I also had to put in some specifics.
Right.
So I just was very, very careful, and
Man,
ask
that's awesome.
forgiveness, but,
yeah. Hey, but you know what? I really can't wait to dive into this. I wish I'd been able to like grab something and have read and speak more to it. But Ben, talking with you, man, I can hear your heart behind that, of just your desire to be accurate to the Bible and your desire to communicate it to an audience that might not pick up a Bible first. But might pick up the graphic novel, and especially for children, and then, the intention, for you and for any of us, especially dads out there, guys, my intention is not to get my kids to know more Bible. My intention is to get my kids to know Jesus. Now they're going to know Jesus through the Bible. So maybe I need to take a step of, hey, check out this graphic novel and look how interesting it is. See, this is actually a Bible story, and then I can open my Bible up and show that to them. And so that, I love it, man. I love your story. I love what we've been able to cover today. And if there's, I was going to do an extra thing, but I think I just want to close with this. Take a couple minutes, Ben, and just talk to someone out there that might want to write, might want to publish. Like, what's like 2 to 3 tips you'd give them to get started and just kind of, get on that journey that you've been on? So
I can think of 3 right off the top of my head. One is, you got to just do it. You have to, like any muscle, anything worth doing, you've got to practice and you've got to get better. That'd be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, and this is kind of just the story of my life, because I had a lot of things that if you were to look at my life, you'd say, oh, it was just dropped in your lap. And honestly, yeah, there have been a number of things that were just dropped in my lap. But it's been primarily, I was ready and I was available, and it was being ready for the moment and being able to say, yeah, I'm going to do this. And, I've always known this is what God wants me to do, because he's equipped me to do these things. And so when these opportunities came about, there's been some I had to turn down. I did turn down, Game of Thrones, a comic book, because of the content of those books. I was just, I've got to be careful, and I've got to turn that down.
I admire that about you, because that would have been, I'm sure, a lucrative thing for you to pursue after.
It would have been regular for sure. I don't know if it would have gotten to lucrative. I'm not sure what happened with the comic books as far as that went, but it would have been regular every month, and it would have been, I don't know if it would have been, don't do my janitor job regular. It would have been regular. But being ready, right time, and just, so there are things that it was just God's timing, as far as like being there when art was there, and art's business side of things was, we want to do this, and my creative dreaming side of things was, I want to do this, and right moment, right time,
I love that,
right place, and ready. And then my third thing that I would say is, your story has value. And so when I say your story, it could be literally your story about you, but it could also be these creative things that you have on your heart. I believe not as strong, biblically, the Bible says, the word will not come back void.
Right.
I believe it comes close, but not quite, with different things that God has maybe inspired you to do, or, the different inspirations you have. But your art, your creative output, your dreams have value. The one thing I would caution is that the value might not be the value that you see the world putting on other things that are similar. And so,
good.
one example I would bring up is a 5-year-old who goes to preschool and makes a Mother's Day card for their mom and then brings it home. That goes up on the fridge. It's so beautiful. So beautiful. You might visit that home and look at that thing and be like, what is that? Like, I can't even, like, there's red and
Right.
green,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and oh, well, it's our
Right.
dog, you know, and
Yeah.
whatever. It's like,
And the
what?
mom starts talking to you like some art appraiser or something like, oh, well, the artist was trying to communicate the
Yeah,
love of
yeah.
the dog.
But there was an audience that
Yeah.
did appreciate it and that it was intended for. And so it may be a small audience, it may be a huge audience. My audience has been bigger than I deserve. I truly believe that. But again, it comes back to just the availability that I was giving to be able to work on some of these things, and just the blessing that God gave me, and the return on investment, quote unquote,
Yeah.
blessing that was me saying, I want to do this, but I want to do it your way. Um, and so I worked on some small things, I worked on some big things, but I would say just be cautious. Don't compare yourself to what everyone else is doing. And it's hard. That's
Yeah.
something I've had to overcome. Let me rephrase that. That's something I have to overcome. I'm overcoming. I can't look at bad reviews, and I
Yeah.
am constantly comparing myself to people who are in similar, people who are on the podcasting scene that are in the same niche that I'm in. I'm constantly comparing myself to them because I was doing this longer, but they're doing it better, and it's,
Yeah.
so be careful about comparison, but remember, God does inspire us. God does give you
Absolutely.
vision and dream. And abilities, and so be ready to use them, and just know that there is an audience. It may be small, it may be big, it may be your wife, it may be your Aunt Ruth, it may be just your church, it may
Yeah.
be a neighborhood thing, but there is value in your output.
And
And
that's so huge right there. Cause I think all of us, again, we're all exposed to the big names in
yeah,
writing or in communication or comics or, all these things like that. And we think like, man, well, if I can't do that, then why would I even, do anything? And that could be in any line of work, guys that are listening,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
anything you're in, you're like, well, I'm not the CEO. I'm not the one who's got this multi-billion-dollar corporation. I'm not going to start a logistics company or for books and it turned into Amazon. You know what I'm saying? But there is value. There is an audience out there, and that's how Men After God started. Our podcast, Ben, we started with because I believe every Christian man deserves the opportunity to achieve success with a thriving faith and family, and we wanted to guide men through that. And we launched on Father's Day, and as of the time of this recording, we've just seen an outpouring of guys just absorbing the content. And it's not like I've talked to one podcaster before I started, and he told me he was getting like 500,000 downloads a month. I'm like, oh wow. Okay. We just hit 1,000 downloads like 10 weeks in, something like that, And so you're going to go at different rates. You're going to reach different people. One of the things about writing I heard that kind of applies here is that, your writing, oftentimes it's not so much for an audience as it is for you. And
Yeah. Yes.
you're writing for yourself. You're writing, is, you have a book in you, is what someone told me. And it's your story. Tell your story. If people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. Who cares? It's your story. And so that really freed me up when I started writing blog articles and getting a little bit more public with some thoughts and opinions that I had. So
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. That's where Ghost of the Future came from, was just me sitting down and saying, there was an identity crisis going on in there as well. But like, I don't have a job right now, the writing side of things. What am I? And then I realized I can just write the book I want to write. I'm going to write the book I want to read, is what it came down to.
Yeah.
Which kind of was inspired by C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, who had that conversation. Like, let's write the books we want to, and and that's where I think that's where Out of the Silent Planet came from. With C.S. Lewis, was out of that conversation. And but yeah, everyone has a story. Everyone tells stories. Story is so important in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you come home from your day. What do? You tell a story about what happened at work. And
the Bible is a narrative. Jesus taught in stories.
Right. Yeah. We have more of his stories than his sermons.
Yeah, absolutely. In which now we can just tell stories as sermons, and that's a whole nother thing. But writers write, communicators communicate. Guys, if you have a dream to write or communicate out there, just start doing it. Ben, I'm so glad to have had you on, man. I want to close out. We got benavery.com. You can go there, grab the books. He puts a personal touch on that stuff, just take a little bit longer. But from what I hear of Amazon and their publishing stuff, I'm sure buying direct from you is better for you as an author. And so
it
is
a slightly better.
Slightly. Well, then, guys, let's support Ben out there. Go over there, grab some books, read them to your kids. I can't wait to get off here. I'm going to be buying some today. And then we've got, let's see, benavery.com. And then I was looking on there. You have a podcast. You mentioned that. What's the name of your podcast? Where can I guys find you?
So the primary podcast that I have is called Strangers and Aliens, which is just strangersandaliens.com. And it's about science fiction, fantasy, and faith and Christianity. We also have a YouTube channel there as well, where I do things called weak connections, where I take a look at something from pop culture, and it's a weak connection to a spiritual truth that hopefully is a strong application. But
wow. Okay. Awesome, man. So I can't wait to get that.
Yeah, it's fun. That's the hobby side of things, so it's not every week, but, and then we also do movie reviews and different things like that. So
that's so cool. Yeah. Well, we're going to have that in the show notes, guys. Be sure to check that out. Support Ben and his journey there. When I get off here, I'm going to invite Ben over to our Facebook community. And so if he'll jump in there, he'll be available. If you got questions about his books or getting published or just writing or anything, Strangers and Aliens, I can't wait to check that out. That'll be cool. Yeah. I'm sure he'll be available for you. Guys, it's been an awesome day. And I hope that this has been a blessing to you, hearing Ben's story and seeing that you have a story yourself. And it may not look like everyone else's, but it is a story. It has value, and God will use you with your gifting, your talent, and your ability to bring him glory, support your family, and again, achieve that success with those thriving relationships. So listen, I hope you've been blessed today. I know I have been. Ben, thanks for being on with us. We've appreciated having you.
Thanks again.
And guys, I will talk to you next week. All right? We'll see you.
Thank you for listening to the Men After God podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and keep up with the show by following us at facebook.com/menaftergod. You can also reach out to Dustin personally at dustin@seekconsulting.us with any questions or for coaching on being a man after God. Until next time.